Hi, welcome to this demonstration of Cinema 4D, After Effects, and Cineware, the exciting bridge between the two applications, which allow you to bring in Cinema 4D imagery into After Effects without rendering it out first. We're also going to be taking a look at CMotion, an innovative feature in Cinema 4D which allows you to create intense cyclical motion, which can be used a lot in advanced character rigs, but can also be used on simpler objects to great effect. So without further ado, let's get started by just looking at this movie here. So I'm going to pause it right around here. And let's try to see what's going on here. Obviously, we've got this butterfly, which is a Cinema 4D animated object. And it's brought into After Effects using Cineware and composited with the background, which is a layer in After Effects. But also take a look at what's happening at the tips of the butterfly's wings. They're emitting trap code particular particles from the tips of their wings. So as the butterfly flies, from the tips of the wings, this magic dust is emanating. So let's take a look at how we can do that. So first, let's open up the model of the butterfly. Okay. And let's just take a look at what's going on here. This butterfly is created out of, its wings are two extrude NURBS objects. Okay, there's the spline. Oops. Okay. And its body is basically just a HyperNURBS object. Okay, here's just going to pick up a point here, show you guys that this is just a HyperNURBS object. It's got a real basic rig involved in the body, which the body is weighted to. It's got a neck bone, pelvis joint, and 4 joints in its tail. It's got a couple of antennas here, and that's about it. So I want to get this butterfly flapping. So let's see how we would do that. So once again, I'm going to be using this tool here. It's called, in the character menu, it's called CMotion. There it is. By default, it comes in off, so I'm going to turn it on. And I'm going to take the left wing and drag it right inside of the CMotion object. Okay. Now, before I get any further, I do want to tell you that on the wing, I've moved the pivot from the center of the wing to the center of the body, okay, using the Move Pivot tool. All right, let's go back to the CMotion object. So as I showed you, I dragged that little wing in there. Okay, so now CMotion allows you to add different objects. Different actions to the different components of your model. So there's a bunch of different ones you can choose from over here. Okay, here's a few of them. So for example, if I were to take like the lift object and I were to add it onto my wing, okay, and I were just to play this animation, you notice that the wing is just going up and down cyclically. So that's all well and good, but that's not the motion that we want to use. Okay, we want to actually, there's just so you can see, let me get rid of that action. Let me add a different action, for example, a push action. Okay, so I'll add that onto my wing now. And you'll notice that if I click on this push action, you can get this little graph which gives you an idea of how your thing will move. We'll take a look at this more later. Oops. But for now, I will just do that and up this amount a little bit. And now you notice that you've added a little push action into your wing. But once again, that's not the action that we want either. So I'm going to go back to the CMotion list, click on this push action, delete it. The one that I do want happens to be called the roll. Okay, so I'm going to click on that, click add it onto my wing, and you'll notice that the wing is going up and down and up and down. Okay, so we're off to a good start. There's a few things that I want to do. I want to click on the action and take a look at its graph. Let me stop this, rewind it. Okay, and what I want to do is in the beginning, I want the wings to be up. Okay, that's actually not far enough up. As a matter of fact, the way that it works is that this graph goes from 0 to 1 to just demonstrate how far it's going to move. But in this amount is what you actually control the amount. So I'm going to just type in, like, for example, a 50 in there. And now it's going from 50 degrees high. So I don't need this point, and I don't need this point. So I'll drag this down to the bottom here. Drag that back up to the top. The other thing I like to do with this CMotion is I like to select these points, twirl down this handle, okay, and change them from cubic to spline interpolation. When you do that, you'll get these tangents, which you can use to get the exact velocity adjustment on that wing. The steeper the slope, the faster it moves, and then the shallower the slope, the slower it moves. So the other thing I'm going to do is if I right-click on this area and choose Link End Tangents and Link End Positions, you'll notice that when I click on one of these things and move its tangent, the other end tangent moves exactly similarly. Okay, so I can do that, and if I move it up and down, they will also move similarly. So that's something that I also like to do. So let's actually go ahead and get this sort of set up like that. Okay, and now let's play this back. And now you'll see that this thing is taking a lot more of a motion from 50 degrees on the top to 50 degrees on the bottom. Okay. I also noticed that it's kind of a little bit too slow, though. The butterfly wing should go faster. So in the CMotion, there's this time amount here. And with this time amount, it's taking 30 frames for it to go from the top, bottom, and back up. So let's change that to 15. So now the butterfly wing is going a lot faster. Okay, so let's go on now. The other thing I would like to do is I'd like to give it a little bit of another action. I'd like to combine two actions on this wing. Right now it's just got that roll action. If I click on the wing, I can actually add another one. It's called a pitch action. Okay, let's add that to the wing. Okay, so what this pitch action does, if I click on it, I've got a small screen because of the capture, but on a bigger screen you'll be able to see more of this at one time. So let's add a little bit, like, for example, 5 degrees. And in the beginning, if you'll notice that the pitch pitches the wing backward and forward. Okay, so what I want to do is I want to have, when it's up, I want to pitch the wing back a little bit. Okay, and then when it comes down, halfway through, I'll pitch it forward. Okay, and then back to the top. So basically, when it pitches forward, it looks like that. So once again, I'll just quickly convert these to splines. Oops. And right-click in it, Link End Tangents, Link End Positions. Okay, and straighten this little guy out here. Okay, and then straighten these out. They look pretty good already. All right, so now we've got a little combination of pitching and flapping. Okay. So the thing is that I think that actually it goes too far down on the bottom. I'd like it to go a little less down on the bottom, but keep it high on the top. So let's go back to the roll and simply move that bottom position up a little bit to here. So now it doesn't go so far down on the bottom, and maybe we'll up it to like 55 degrees. So it's only going to go halfway down on the bottom that it goes onto the top. So if it was 50, it would be 50 degrees on top and 25 degrees on the bottom. So, okay, so now that we've got that, Let's actually go ahead and do the other wing. So we can just select these two actions, right-click on them, and choose Copy. Let's drag in the other wing, the wing right. We'll drag that into CMotion. We'll click on the wing. Okay, this is seems to be some sort of display error that's really not there. As soon as I click off of that, wing disappears. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to right-click on that, and I'm going to hit paste. So it pastes those two actions onto the other wing. But you'll notice that it's not moving right. I can easily fix that by clicking on the roll, and instead of 55 degrees, I'm going to say negative 55 degrees, and you'll notice that that just fixes the problem. And similarly on the pitch, I'm just going to say a -5. Okay, so now we've got the butterfly sort of flapping around and doing its thing. And I didn't even really set one keyframe. So now the thing is about the body. The body, if you'll notice, is really rigid, like if it's made out of stone. Okay, so I want to have a little movement in the body. Let me stop this. Let me bring this back to the beginning. So as I mentioned before, the body has the tail. I want to have the tail sort of curl up and down as the wings flap. So you'll notice that the tail has these joints in it. And if I were to select the first joint in the tail here, and if I were to rotate it, the other joints rotate with it because they're parented to it. However, I want to have a little curl in the tail. I don't want it to be so stiff like that. So I could, for example, rotate the first one a little bit, select the second joint, rotate the second one a little bit, take the third one, rotate the third one a little bit, and put a little curl in the tail. But that's a lot of rotating. So instead of doing all that rotating, I'm going to use a little bit of espresso here just to make things easier. So if I were to click on this null, for example, right-click on it, Cinema 4D tags, espresso. So espresso can be very useful, and it doesn't have to be all that difficult. For example, what I'm going to do is really simple. I'm just going to take the first joint, the tail joint, the first tail joint, drag it in, and it creates a node right here. Then I'm going to take the second tail joint here, and the third tail joint here. I don't need to worry about the fourth one because it's just at the tip. There's no geometry that's really connected to it. Now, on these nodes here, you've got the left side, or the blue side, is the input to the node. The right side, or the red side, is the output of the node. So I need to put some ports onto this node to make it work. So if I just click on this red area here, I can go ahead and I can say coordinates, rotation, rotation P, or rotation pitch, okay? And it'll put an output port onto this node. Now on this node here, I'm just going to say coordinates, rotation, rotation P, puts an input port on this side. And I'm also going to do that with this one. Rotation, rotation P. And what I'm going to do now is I'm just going to connect the output of this node, its rotation output, into the input of these nodes. So all that's really happening here is I'm telling these two joints to get the same rotation of the first joint. So it's a real simple espresso setup that you can use for this. It's just sort of a little example. So I'm going to close that. If I were to click on the first joint here now and rotate it, you notice that the other two joints are rotating the same as the first joint. So if I were to rotate it, I'm not going to curl it that much, but just to show you how it works. This is actually used a lot on finger joints as well. So you can just rotate the first digit and then all other digits rotate along with it. I'll undo that a couple of times. And now what I'm going to do is I'm going to once again open up the CMotion, okay, and drag in that first joint. Okay, I'll just put it right here on the top. So now that's in there. And I want to add another pitch action to it. Add. Okay, there it is. And in the beginning, when the wings are up, I want this thing to, let me actually add a little bit of a mount here, 10 degrees. When it's up, I want this thing to rotate down. That's actually a little bit too high, so we're actually going to make it 5 degrees. Okay, and then when the wings come down halfway through the motion, I want it to come down, to go up, okay, and then come back down at the end. So once again, I'm just going to select these points, twirl this down, make them splines, link end tangents, link end positions. We've got the little things going on here. And now let's take a look at what it looks like. So it's going sort of up and down opposite. It's a little bit too much actually still, so I'm just going to hit 4 degrees. Okay. So now similarly, I just want to do something like that for the head or for the neck. So I'm just going to take the neck, drag it into CMotion, add a little pitch option to it. Here's the neck joint right here. Okay. Now it's going to add that pitch action. And when this time we're going to do the opposite. Okay. Actually, let me add about 3 or 4 degrees on it. When the wings are up, the head is going to be down. The wings come down, the head goes up. Similarly. I like to convert these to splines because you get the most control over their velocity, but you could just leave them as cubic interpolation as well, up to you. Link end tangents, link end positions, okay, and oops, go ahead and make them do their thing. Okay, so let's take a look at this thing here. And you can see that there we've got a cyclical flapping motion with a little bit of motion in the body. All right, I just wanted to show you that actually Cinema 4D comes with a model here, Studio does, of a T-Rex that's walking. And here's, for example, CMotion used on a more complicated walk cycle here. But similarly, it's using the same principles that we used on the butterfly. There's a lot more actions in this rig. This dinosaur does have a rig. Okay, if you want to see it, you can turn on those layers. Okay, and you can see that there's the rig for this dinosaur. But let's turn the rig off. And let's take a look at its CMotion. So we'll click on the CMotion object. And for example, we'll find the head. Here's the head. We'll twirl that down. And as you can see that there's a bunch of actions just like the actions that we were using. For example, we'll take the roll action here. And, you know, for example, if we were to up this amount over here, you'll notice that now there's more roll in the head. I could even do it more. You see, so we've got like more of a head roll there, okay? Or, for example, on the pitch, you know, let's say we were to up the pitch a lot, you know, then his head really goes up and down like a funky dinosaur. But you'll also notice that there's something else here. It's open and close. And that's usually not in there. That's something that the guy who made this dinosaur put in. It's like user data. And it controls the opening and closing of its mouth. So, for example, if I were to change this, this thing and sort of maybe move this one all the way up and take these things off, and you can see that now the mouth is behaving differently. You know, I can make it go bigger in the beginning. So now he's, you know, really sort of biting down, and so on and so forth. So you can, so that's what all of these things are. Let's say in the foot, we take the lift, okay, and we up that to like 200, let's say. Now you can see that his foot is lifting more on that side. Okay, so all of this is happening with CMotion. It's an incredibly useful tool, as I was saying. One other thing that I wanted to tell you about CMotion is that once you've got you know, it all set up and you've got your motion right, you can tell it to walk, either stay static or, for example, let me rewind this, stop this and rewind this. I can tell it to walk in a line, for example, and then now if I were to do it, you'll notice that he starts walking in a line. Then there's no foot slipping or anything like that. You can even, for example, let me go to a top view here. Okay, and then choose, for example, make a spline. For example, I'll take a spline and I'll sort of move it sort of in a position like this. Okay, so I can tell it now on the CMotion, I can tell it walk along a path, and then you drag that spline right in there. And then if you were to play it now, you'll see that he's actually walking along that spline. Okay, and I can always move that spline anytime in the middle, and then he'll follow it wherever I move it. Okay, and it's sort of a perfect motion. Okay, so anyway, let me close this because I want to get back to our butterfly. And actually, I'm going to just move ahead a little bit, and I'm going to open up this file. So in this file, we've got a vibrate tag added to the butterfly, which is causing the butterfly to like flap around or move around a little bit. Vibrate tag is really easy to demonstrate. I'm just going to make a new file temporarily, make a cube, right-click on the cube, Cinema 4D tags, vibrate, and I'm going to enable the position vibration. Right now it's only vibrating on the X position. See that? But for example, if I put in 250 on the X and Y, and now I'll add another 250 on the Z, now it's vibrating in all directions. Okay, so you can also enable the scale, so it vibrates the scale, or the rotation too. So we'll put like 30 degrees each on the rotation, so now it's vibrating position and rotation. If you want to slow it down, just lower this number for, like, let's say a 1 here and here, and now you're rotating much slower. You want it slower than that, you could just like go to 0.5 or 0.5, then it rotates really slow. And so however, you can control the speed of it. So that's what he's got in it. I'll close this. And I've also just have a camera just moving through it from left to right. But what I want to do is I'm going to pause this for a minute because I want you to notice that on the wings, there's also a null that's parented to the wing and moved right to the tip of the wing right here. And we're going to use these nulls to apply trap code particular emitters onto the tips of these wings in After Effects. Okay. So there's one on there, there's one on there, okay? And they're sort of locked into that position wherever the butterfly goes, they're always going to be at the tips of those wings. So how do we do that? How do we tell, how are we going to tell After Effects that these particular nulls are going to be where to apply the trap code emitters? And the way to do that is with these two little tags here. These are called external compositing tags. All you do is right-click on the null, Cinema 4D tags, and you choose external compositing tags. So we'll click on this right now, and we'll say make a solid 20 pixels by 20 pixels red color. Okay, so now we're ready to bring it into After Effects and start taking a look at Cineware. So let us open up After Effects. Okay, so here's After Effects, and I've just got one layer in this file of this sort of planetary background here. Let me temporarily add a camera just to show you that this layer is a 3D file. Okay, so as you can see that it's just a 3D backplate sort of in the background there. All right, so let me get rid of the camera. So now let us bring in the butterfly. So I'll right click here, I'll choose Import File. Okay, and actually it's over here. So we'll bring that in. Okay, so here's the file. We'll drag it right into our comp. And we'll see right away that this butterfly, we're going to switch this from software shading, which is a quicker way to display the model. We're going to switch this to final render. Okay, so what's happening right now is actually After Effects is invoking the render from Cinema 4D to render out the 3D. Pretty neat. Okay, no rendering. And as you'll see, if I were to turn off this background layer, you know, it's coming in with an alpha channel. It's properly alpha'd. So let me actually go ahead and go back out and turn on the background layer. Okay, so now I want to make sure my Cinema 4D layer is selected. Okay, and what I want to do is in the Cineware controls down here, where it says Cinema 4D Scene Data Extract, I want to press that Extract button. And what's going to happen is that that's going to pull out a bunch of Cinema 4D data from Cinema 4D into After Effects. So let's see what it got. So first of all, it picked up a camera. Now, what's really cool about Cineware is that I can tell Cineware to use the comp camera, okay, instead of the Cinema 4D camera. And then what I can do is change this camera. I can reanimate the camera. For example, you know, if I wanted to move it over a little bit to here, let's say, or in or out or rotate the camera, I can do that. So I can reanimate the camera in Cinema 4D, okay? Or I can go back and tell Cinema 4D to use the Cinema 4D camera, and then I can switch back to Cinema 4D and reanimate the camera here. And obviously, if you do the camera animation in After Effects, you can, you'll notice that this background layer here is also now moving along with our butterfly because it's being seen by that camera, whereas it wasn't doing that before. It also brought in two lights, and the lights you can use to light things in After Effects. Well, right now I don't have anything really I want to light in After Effects, but if you had some text and you wanted to use those lights, you can do that. To relight the butterfly, however, you do need to jump back into Cinema 4D and change the lights here. Okay, and therein lies the power and flexibility of Cineware, because you can always jump back and forth between the two programs and, for example, change a light. For example, this light is the one underneath of it. Let's say I made it brighter, 100%, and we'll save it, okay? And if I go back to After Effects now, you'll notice that it immediately updates without rendering it first. So, you know, this is the real big thing that we need to stress about Cineware, is that anytime you make a little change, you don't have to go in and re-render everything, all your passes, all your alpha channels or object buffers or whatever it is, you know, diffuse layers and lights and everything. All you need to do is just make the change, switch back, save it, and it updates. So I won't be using these lights here in After Effects, so I'm just going to turn them off. I can leave them there, but in case I ever need them, but I'm just going to turn them off for now. And now here are these two nulls that came in when I extracted the data. And these two nulls were the ones that were generated, if you recall, using the external compositing tags, okay, that were attached to these two nulls here. Okay? So the ones that we set up before result in these two nulls, which are actually moving precisely in 3D space along with the butterfly. So you can see they're right on there, and they're corresponding to the exact 3D coordinates of the tips of the wings, or the exact positions of where those two nulls were. All right, so and you can see that there they are. Okay. Now what we want to do is we want to use the position of these two nulls to attach particular particle emitters to them. So what we're going to do is we're going to go ahead and we're going to say Layer, New, Solid, okay? And we're going to click OK. We're going to go ahead, Effect, Trap Code, Particular, okay? Now, if you haven't used Particular before, or it just basically emits particles from an emitter, okay? That's sort of what it does. There's a lot more to it than that, but that's all I'm really going to be caring about right now. So, for example, if I were to move this emitter to here, then the particles get emitted from there. And I can animate that emitter around. Okay? So what I'm going to do is actually I'm going to turn on the camera and show this. Right now the emitter is somewhere because we've moved the camera from the center, so the emitter is down here somewhere. But that's okay because we want to attach the emitter to one of these nulls. Let's say this one. So how would we do that in After Effects? Well, what I can do is I can open up the effect controls here. Here are the effect controls for the emitter, and you'll notice there's a position X, Y, and a position Z. Okay, and those are the 3D coordinates for the emitter. And the null also has a position over here, transform, position. But this coordinate is all in one. It's X, Y, and Z. So it's a three-dimensional array, and there's the coordinates. For some reason, Particular breaks the X, Y, and Z separately. I'm sure they have a reason for that. So what we want to do is we want to Alt-click on the stopwatch for the position X, Y, and that will add an expression to the parameter. So I'm going to take the pick whip and bring it down, and I'm going to bring it down to the position of the null. Now, I know what you're saying. Well, wait a minute. Wait just a second here. That's like a three-dimensional coordinate, and the other one is just a two-dimensional coordinate. So what do we actually, what's going to happen? So let's try it. So let's go ahead and click it, okay? And let's actually read this expression and see what it says. It says that this equals this comp, layer particles left, which is the name of the null, transform position, temp 0 and temp 1. So like I said, it's a three-dimensional array, and its indices are 0, 1, and 2, X, Y, and Z. So you notice it's only taking 0 and 1. So it knows automatically that to take just the first two, the X, Y. So now we've set the position of the emitter to be the same XY as the null. Now, of course, we also need the Z. So I'm also going to click on the Z position, hold down the Alt key. It will add an expression to it. Take the pick whip, okay, drag it down to the null. And instead of clicking over here on the position, I'm actually going to click on the third one only, See how it highlights just the Z position? I'll click on that, and you'll notice on this one, it takes the second index, which is the Z index. Okay? So what happens is that if I were now to just preview this render, okay, you'll see that what's happening is that that emitter is nailed right onto that null. Okay. So I'll just see that. I just rendered a little bit of it, but you can see what's happening here. All right, now, and of course you can hide that null so you won't see it in your final render, which is important because it'll kind of look weird with those two little nulls stuck onto the ends of the wings. All right, now I'll just open up this other comp, which is just a little bit later in our progression. And in this one, I've duplicated the emitter layer, and I did the same thing that I did with the first one, and I attached it to this particle right. So now we've got particles coming out of the left and right. The other thing that I've done is I've changed the particles from spheres, like what they are here, to stars to make it look a little more magical. Changed their color from white to a purplish color, and then added a little gravity so that way when they get kicked off of the wings, they don't just keep flying out here, but they sort of kick off and then they all sort of start drifting down at some point. So that's that. So we've got, you know, something like that coming down off of the wings. Something else that I do really want to show you is a great new feature of the new version of After Effects. And if you'll notice, let me zoom in a little bit on the butterfly. You notice that it seems like I've rendered it with a bit of motion blur, and this is like correct motion blur because the tips of the wings or the edges of the wings are going faster than the center of the butterfly, and you notice that they're blurred more. So how did I do that? Well, I could have rendered it, you know, with motion blur, which takes more time, but there's a new effect in After Effects CC, Creative Cloud, called Pixel Motion Blur. And Pixel Motion Blur, I've been finding, does a great job to add motion blur to 3D renders. I mean, you could also use Real Smart Motion Blur and render out motion vectors. That works good too. You could just render out motion blur from Cinema 4D. That also works. But I'm really loving this Pixel Motion Blur. I'll turn it off. You can see it off and on. I've used it on, you can up the detail too if you want to, or the shutter angle. So obviously 360 will give you the most blur, okay? And you can up the quality on that too, so you get a real nice sort of blur if you want. But I'm just adding a touch of blur here. And so I love this thing. I think that it was a great addition, and it's certainly great for 3D artists. So we'll just take a quick look once again at our final render over here. And there we have the 3D particular emitters emitting from the tips of the butterfly. You can see the motion blur working there. There's the vibrate tag. And one thing that we really, I really would like to stress is that use of CMotion, which can be a really, really powerful tool in your arsenal. So don't just think that it's for high-end character work. It's for any sort of motion that repeats over and over again. So thanks for joining me, and see you next time.